And welcome to the Matrix of Gadgetzan! Last time I'm going to do this, guys. So, I'm doing a series that re-reviews our reviews of the original cards that we'd already done. We did this for the One Night in Karazhan expansion. We re-reviewed the Whispers of the Old Gods. And then we did it for Karazhan. And now we're going to do it for Mean Streets of Gadgetzan. So, for those of you who don't know, and I'm going to put it up as soon as I can, this video is going to be coming out Sunday night. But Monday, supposedly, there's going to be a huge announcement on the new expansion. Fingers crossed. And of course, I'll be churning out a crap ton of content for that. But I wanted to look back on the cards that were for the Mean Streets of Gadgetzan and talk about where they are in the meta now, and then update sort of the scores that I gave for them before and the scores that I'm going to give for them now relative to how they are playing in the current meta and how I perceive them to play in the future meta. So get ready. It's going to take a while, but it's going to be well worth it because we're going to learn a lot about how we review cards and how we can make better predictions in the future. So, card number 1, Freezing Potion. I originally said this card was crap. It turned out to be crap. Its effect just doesn't do enough. Doesn't do enough stuff, and it's not really worth a card slot in your deck. And yeah, it does combo with Archmage Nidus. Yes, it combos with Flamewaker, but Flamewaker is getting rotated out, and Archmage, you have other spells that are more impactful than this card. It really just doesn't do enough. I originally rated it like a 3. It ends up being like a 0, basically. Good in Arena, though. It's a 1, so good in Arena. Alright, Counterfeit Coin. I was very high on this card for Miracle Rogue. Unfortunately, I think Miracle Rogue is actually a little too slow now, especially with the very aggressive Pirate Warrior meta. And couple that with the Reno decks that, you know, it does well against the Reno decks. I'll say that. Like, its ability to just get a bunch of burst on turn 7, 8, 9, etc. Is big. And Miracle Rogue is a deck, and it's good, but it's only, I'd say, tier 2 at best. And so, Counterfeit Coin is a huge part of that deck, but since it's not really part of a deck that I feel like is really strong, Counterfeit Coin ends up getting like a 6. Originally, I rated it really high, like 9 or 10, but that was at a time when Miracle Rogue was really good. So, Weasel Tunneler. I love this card, but it's poop. You're never going to play it in an actual constructed deck. There's really no point. Like I said, as much as I love the darn card, as fun as I think it is, and it's one of my highest rated videos, oddly enough, it's just not a good card. It's a 0, and yeah, it doesn't see play, and it's only for memes. So yeah. Small Time Buccaneer. I was very, very high on this card. I rated it a 10, and yay me, totally right. This card is so good, it's literally getting nerfed. They're going to turn it into a 3-1, and then after that, honestly, I don't think it's going to see play. I mean, a 1-1 that can turn into a 3-1, yay. I mean, it summons patches. But honestly, weirdly enough, Dread Corsair is probably going to be... Not Dread... Is it Dread Corsair? Is that what it's called? Something like that. I don't know. Bloodsail Corsair. That's what it is. It's a 1-mana 1/2 that removes the durability from your weapon. That'll probably get played more than the Small Time Buccaneer, at least in terms of neutral pirates. But I think we will see a rise in the actual Buccaneer, the 2-1 that gives your dagger an extra attack, at least in Rogue. And I think Pirate Warrior will just continue to run it because it's just extra damage. So I think it's one of those things where instead of seeing it in every deck, every Shaman deck, you're just going to see it in Pirate Warrior only. So 10 out of 10 originally, 10 out of 10 now. But after the nerf, I'm going to give it like a... It's going to be very niche, so like a 5.5 probably. Patches. 10 out of 10 when we first saw it. Thought it was incredible, being able to get a 1/1 out. Basically doubling the... essentially doubling the effectiveness of your 1-drops if they were pirates. Right? It had to be good. 10 out of 10 when we first reviewed it. 10 out of 10 now. Continues to define the meta. We called this one. We nailed this one. Misters of Mixtures. This card I thought was going to do better than it actually does. It sees play in Reno decks. It does see play in a few niche N'Zoth decks. And it's not even really good in those. I don't know, I kind of thought I thought this card was going to be in every single control deck. And you just honestly don't see it that much. You see it in Reno Lock, and that's about it. But, you know, so my rating of 10 out of 10 for this card was probably a little high. It's more like a 7 or an 8. Like, it's definitely seeing play in certain specific decks, in specific archetypes. Mainly Reno Lock is where you see it the most, and sometimes in Reno Mage. So, I mean, it is a part of big Tier 1 decks. It's just not... It didn't have the kind of impact I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be an auto-include in every control deck. But honestly, control decks are strong, but even slotting this as a one-of seems to be hard to do. So it ends up being about a 6 or a 7. Mean Street Marshal. I was very high on this card, you know? A 1-mana 1/2 that draws you a card if it has more than 2 attack. I figured it'd be easy to get the attack up, and I believe I gave it like an 8. It turns out that Paladins are just too slow, and that the hand buff mechanic I totally whiffed on. I thought it was going to be amazing, you know. But then you look at Jades, and the Jades are just better. The Jades are way stronger, and hand buffs take too much time, and you know it loses to Pirate Warrior too easily. And this card does not, you know, it can't kill a small time Buccaneer unless you buff it, and then you're just playing a buffed 1-drop. And so aggro Paladin and mid range buff your stuff Paladin never really became a thing. And I tried. Oh God, I tried. So this card ends up being like a 2 or a 3, even though I had it rated at least an 8, you know, so we definitely whiffed on that one. But it could see its time if the meta does slow down with the upcoming nerfs and the upcoming expansion. So don't sleep on this card yet. Cabal Lackey, 1-mana 2/1. So I prefaced this card by saying if Secret Mage becomes a thing, this card will be included in it, and it will be very good. Unfortunately, Secret Mage never became a thing, and in fact, Reno Mage did become a thing, surprisingly. I didn't think Reno Mage was going to become a thing. They weren't really supporting it, but it was already a thing before, so. So this card ends up being bad. In fact, it ends up being really bad. It's statted kind of weird with the 1 health, and it just dies, and if you have a secret, you have to play it from hand. And honestly, this card would see play if it was a 1-mana 1/1 that had the Mad Scientist effect. Like, people would play that. Just get a secret out if it dies. Like, people would play the shit out of that. But this card, no. And Secret Mage, frankly, isn't going to work. And I kind of knew it wouldn't, just because I knew that Mage Secrets weren't that good, and they only gave him 1 extra one, and pushing a Polymorph is a cool card, just not good enough. This card ends up getting a 1. And like I said, you know, originally I had it rated highly, but Secret Mage ended up not being anything. Same thing with the Grimscale Chum. Give a random Murloc on your hand, +1/+1. Weirdly enough, this buff is just not that strong. Like it takes so much time to buff your stuff, then play it, then have them attack. And so you're adding an extra turn of activity to only get +1/+1, and that was sort of the problem. Is you played a creature, it buffed a creature in your hand, then you had to play that creature. Then you had to wait a turn in order to attack with that creature. So you're really essentially waiting 3 turns to attack with this buffed creature, but that creature is only buffed by +1/+1. So you're not really getting enough tempo to make up for the fact that you can't play this thing that early. Mid-range Murloc Paladin ended up not being good, and in fact is eclipsed by Shaman Murloc, which is so sad to say. I mean, it makes more sense. I've always thought thematically having Murlocs and Paladin was stupid. You know, they should be a Shaman thing. So, I'm not surprised. But, to be honest, didn't really rank Grimscale Chum that high. Didn't think a mid-range Murloc deck was going to work. So, I rated it a 6 in my original video, and ends up being like a 1 or a 2. Alley Cat. Rip Hunter. So, In a vacuum, this card is good, and I think in a vacuum, this card does deserve the 9 rating that I gave to it originally. And again, I haven't rewatched the video, so if any of these scores are off like by a lot, that's fine. I'm going with what I remember, what my initial thoughts were. So don't quote me on any of these scores, but I have a pretty good idea of how I was thinking back then. Like in a vacuum, this is good. 2/1/1s on turn 1, great. The problem is that even if this card get buffed, it only summons a 1/1 cat, which is fair. The problem is fair in Hearthstone doesn't get it done. Broken in Hearthstone gets it done. Fucking OP gets it done. Just pretty good or fair does not get it done, and this card doesn't get it done. And that was the problem with every single Hunter card, is that they were just good, balanced, regularly statted things that if they got buffed were slightly better. But you just can never effectively buff stuff in Hunter. And the Hunter buffs are terrible. And so they ended up not having any viable archetypes that could keep up with all the buff decks and keep up with all the Kazakas decks. And so Hunter just went by the wayside. So I still think this card is good, and I still think this card can be good if Hunter ever becomes a thing again, but Hunter is so bad. And this gets like a 3 or a 4 still. But I rated it like, I believe, a 9 or a 10 originally. So we've been whiffing a lot. Smuggler's Run. Stupid hand buffs. God damn it, I can't believe hand buff didn't work. It's still a good card. It's a good card for the mechanic. It's necessary. I like the design. It is 1 mana. It is cheap. But hand buff itself is just too goddamn slow. Like, it's better just to play 1-drop, 2-drops. It's better just to curve out than to play this and then try to play overstatted minions. They're just not... The extra +1/+1 doesn't really affect anything because you can only typically play 1 or 2 cards at a time. And so you're not really getting the benefits of this card. And so that's what ends up being the problem. If this was 0 mana, hand buff could actually work. But it's not. So this card is kind of crappy, as is all hand buff things. Same thing with Smuggler's Crate. Crappy. It's a hand buff. Yeah, if any of the hand buffs would have worked, it's this one. But it's fucking random. That's the other problem, is the hand buffs are random. If the hand buffs you could choose, hand buff might actually work. But the random just kills it. Plus the fact that it shoots that goddamn bat thing at the creature, and so you know it's a creature, and you know which one is buffed. Like, it gives away information to your opponent, and your opponent can just prepare for that creature. So it's just a bad idea. Just bad design all around in that sense. Potion of Madness. Actually a really good card. I rated it really highly, and it turns out it's even better than people thought, Being able to steal Bran, being able to steal Blood Mage Thalnos, being able to just steal your opponent's wolf thing, the shaman wolf thing, was amazing. Anything with a death rattle stealing was great. And then it spawned a really cool deck, the Genie Zephyr's OTK deck. So I rated this card pretty highly, like a 7 or an 8, and it exceeded my expectations. And honestly, I think it's a 10 now. It's pretty much an auto-include, and it's really, really good for battling early aggression. And it turned out, that's what it's being used for. It's a lot of times it's just, turn 4, 5, or 6, you're playing this card and dropping a 5-drop and doing a nice double trade, getting a 2-for-1 and developing your own creature. Huge. So, great card. Even better, far surpassed its initial thought process. Pint-Sized Potion. This card, man, I was really high on this card because I thought it would create a combo-oriented priest that would be able to utilize Cabal Shadow Priest, that would be able to utilize Potion of Madness, that would be able to utilize, a lot of stuff. And so, for a long time, Pint-Sized Potion wasn't very good. Then, in turn, the Genie Zephyr's OTK deck started using this, and Pint-Sized Potion found its place. So I had originally rated it like a 6 or a 7, and then it saw no play for a long time, and then it finally saw a little bit of play in what I consider to be a very cool deck, but it really only fits into that deck. And frankly, aside from the OTK, this card is not really used in any other decks, and so to me it's more like a 5. But, not bad. Morgan Lotus. Token Druid was a thing for about 2 weeks. Jackie Chan made up a really cool token deck that spread like wildfire for a while, and then it ended up getting crushed by a lot of early decks. But for a while, it was good. There was a period where that token druid was seen a lot on ladder. So it did see play in a relative niche deck that didn't last very long. It still counts. I'd still give it a 5. That being said, I do think this card has a future, and I do think the next expansion will make this card a lot better. And I think combining this card with sort of an aggro Jade Druid build is possible, and I think would eventually be better than the current very control style Jade Druid that is out there. Jade Idol, great card. I thought it was 10 out of 10. It is a 10 out of 10. That being said, it's a lot slower than people thought, and it's 1 mana summon a Jade Golem, which is great, but so many times people would play it initially and try to shuffle the copies into the deck and then play them later, and it turns out it's better just to get the Golem train rolling and then draw the second Jade Idol, play Fandral, play this card, shuffle the copies, get the Golem. So the problem with Jade Druid is it's just very, very slow, and you need to really protect yourself and control and, you know, use Feral Rage and Moonglade Portals and stuff to heal yourself, keep yourself alive, to eventually get a lot of big Jades. And so if you can hold off long enough, that's great. The problem with it is that if you don't draw enough early game removal or early game board presence, Druid gets run over. Gets run over by Pirates, gets run over by Rogue, gets run over by early aggressive decks, you know, Shaman especially. Shaman just trounces this deck. And so that's really the problem, is just the aggro kills this card. So originally it was like a 10 out of 10, but, you know, 10 was the highest and I wanted to go higher. I'd say this card is more like an 8. You know, it does make a good deck. It does make a deck go, and it is a strong, strong card in that deck. But to be honest, that deck is not tier 1. I know a guy. Crap. Why not just play the taunt minion that you had? I mean, it's nice to have the card draw. You know, I think every class now has their 1 mana discover something card. But Taunt Warrior is shit. We all knew it was going to be shit. We all knew it wouldn't work. And so this card was very low rated. I believe it was like a 3 or a 4, and it is definitely even worse than that. So Getaway Kodo. Little surprised this card didn't work, but only because Paladin hasn't worked, and this card is actually... It's weird because the 1 mana cost is actually the thing that fucks it up. Because instead of playing your Tyrion immediately on turn 8 when you need it, you have to play this first and then play Tyrion, which usually will cost you 9 mana, delaying your Tyrion to turn, potentially allowing your opponent to kill you. And frankly, getting to turn 9 in any game, you're only doing that maybe a third of the time anyway. So what other things did you want to get away Kodo, aside from Tyrion or Rag Lightlord, that you wanted to get back? I don't know, Wicker Flame, maybe? It'd be kind of nice. But basically a big legendary, and it was hard enough to slot this in. You know, Paladin was having enough trouble keeping up with anything, let alone being able to play Getaway Kodo. I think this is a really good card, and I think it's probably one of the best secrets. Just Paladin doesn't have a place right now, and this card doesn't have a place right now. But that doesn't mean this card is bad. I do think it will find a place eventually, but its time is not now. Originally gave this a really high score. I think it was like a 9 or an 8, and I'm going to end up giving it like a 4. Like, it's good, but not seeing play. Finders Keepers. Thought this card was poop. Discovering a card with Overload that had Overload itself was terrible. Essentially paying 2 mana to get another card that would overload you again is bad. Really bad. And guess what it turns out? Really bad card. Nobody plays it. Dumb card. I was glad that they printed it, though, because I felt like it weakened Shaman, and it didn't, because Shaman is still really good. And I remember saying that in the review, where I was just like, guys, don't sleep on Shaman. You know, people are selling, yay, mid-range Shaman is dead. No, it's not. It's just mid-Jade Shaman now, instead of mid-range Shaman. Like, we're pretty sure it wasn't going to die. Ah, Trog Beast Rager. Random. That's the problem. Random. If you're going to give away information that there's a minion there that is buffed, you need to be able to target said minion. And because this is random, it's just bad. It's just bad. It doesn't do enough. It's just a 3-2 for 2 that buffs something else that you then have to play later. I mean, Hunter, the whole point of Hunter was that it tempoed out faster than your opponent could handle, and it played stuff quicker than your opponent could handle. And Trog Beast Ranger is not fast, it's slow. And it's buffing stuff in your deck slowly. So it sucks. Public Defender, garbage. We all knew it was garbage. Turned out to be garbage. Mana Geode, I loved this card. I thought this was going to be a 10. I thought it was going to be so good in auto-include. I was like, this is the Priest 2-drop. Well, you know what? It turns out 3 health is terrible. It really is. It's garbage. You're so much better off just playing a Wormrest Agent and then buffing that. And the problem with Priest 2 is that, you know, there's Fiery War Axe, which kills this, right? Jade Claws, or Spirit Claws would kill this with spell damage, or Jade Claws would kill this with the 1/1 it spawns. There's just too much stuff. There's too much stuff that kills this, and if you play this and then play Cabal Talon Priest on it, then on turn 4, you're spending 2 mana to heal this guy. That's not really worth it. Yeah, you get a 2/2, but then what else are you going to do with your turn? You better hope you have another Wormrest Agent or another Mana Geode to back it up. And so this card requires too much setup, too much stuff, and it ended up being terrible, and it does not see play. You know, I'd give it like a 2 now. And originally, I literally gave it a 10. I thought it was the best. I thought this was the card that was going to define the Priest meta. Wrong. Jade Swarmer. So as far as Jade cards go, it is a good card. And it is good in Rogue, and they do have Unearthed Raptor. And I have piloted recently a Jade N'Zoth Tempo Rogue deck all the way up to rank 4, actually. And I'm trying to climb again. I've been stuck at rank 4 for a while. But this is a good card. It does fit in the deck. It is good that it's there. It sucks that it's a 1/1. It's just so low stat and so low impact, and it's a pretty bad late game draw. Because the problem is when you play this card, you play it, it has to die, then you get the Golem, and then the Golem takes another turn in order to actually do anything. So you're really actually not getting a Golem for 3 turns. And that's the problem with this card, and that's why it's slow. However, it is still a good card in a deck that I think is good, but pretty much everybody else does not think is good, and it's not seeing play. And honestly, a lot of my wins are coming from the surprise factor, not from the quality of the deck. So I originally gave this card like a 8 out of 10, and currently I'm going to give it a 5. Like I said, it is seeing play in my deck, so that gets something. That's worth something, but it doesn't mean it's good. Hobart Grapplehammer. Man, I thought this card was going to be good. 2 mana 2/2, give all your weapons +1/+1. I thought this was going to slot into Pirate Warrior easy peasy. But it turns out playing a 2 mana 2/2 is kind of shitty. Because why not play a 2 mana 2/3? Why not play a Fiery War Axe? It's better to just play the War Axe than to buff this and then play the War Axe later. And so, like every other buff something in your hand or deck mechanic, it's just too slow. And ends up seeing no play, even though I rated this very, very highly. I rated this like an 8. Honestly, I think it's like a 1 now. It's just too slow. It doesn't fit in any deck. But it could. It could. It just doesn't currently. Hand buff. God, I love you. God damn it, you suck. 2 mana 1/1. This could have just been a 2 mana 2/2. It would have been fine. Like, it would have been fine. Honestly, I don't think they tested the hand buff mechanic enough. Or I think they overestimated how strong that mechanic was going to be. I think they thought it was going to be better than it was, and they didn't realize how good Jade was going to be, nor how good the Kazakus decks were going to be. And so this card unfortunately falls by the wayside. But, you know, so until Paladin finds its place, I think this card will be bad, but I think it could be good if Paladin does find a spot in the meta. Grimstone Informant, same thing, same problem. Hunter, Paladin, and Warrior cards are generally kind of shitty and generally slow, and so this card just doesn't see play. I honestly did not think this card was that good to begin with, because I did think that Hunter, Paladin, Warrior cards weren't really worth discovering, and you're paying 2 mana for a 1/1. That's understated. Now, it's nice if you do get it buffed, but man, it's actually hard to buff this card to any sort of significant stat line. So this card ends up getting like a 3, and originally I had it slated like a 6, so it's not a huge difference, but it went from playable to not playable. Gadgetzan Socialite. I thought there was a chance this card could see some play. A 2-mana 2/2 that restores 2 health. I mean, that's not negligible, but it's also not good enough to actually see any constructed play, but I thought it would be good in Arena, and it turns out it was good in Arena, so I originally gave it a 4, and it ends up being about a 4. Gadgetzan Ferryman. I thought there was a chance this card would be an inclusion into Jade Rogue because they were missing a Jade card. So I thought you could use this to bounce Aya and to bounce Jade Spirits, and also to bounce... what am I thinking? Like Leroy, maybe? I don't know. There's stuff here, right? Like, I thought there was potential for this card to be good. And it's 2 mana, 2/3, so it's still also just a dude and a body. But it turns out, you know, if you want to return a friendly minion to your hand, you're better off using Shadow Step to reduce the cost of that minion, as opposed to playing this and adding a 2/3 body. I think the thought process was play Jade Spirit, play this, replace the 2/3 that you played with this, get the Jade Spirit back in your hand, play it again the next turn. I think that was the idea. But it turns out it's not a good idea, because that's too fucking slow and you get run over. So I was pretty sure this card was bad, but had a place, and it turns out it just doesn't have a place. So I think I rated it like a 4, and it turns out it's like a 1. Friendly Bartender, this card was never good. We all knew it was never good. It's 2 mana, 2/3, it's slow, it just heals you for 1. It doesn't do enough impact. We all knew it was bad, it turned out to be bad. Dirty Rat. Everyone was kind of unsure on this one. I remember thinking, if this pulls out Reno, this card is fucking great. If this pulls out a Doomsayer and kills your opponent's board, this card is great. But the other thing I said is that if you just play it straight up on turn 2, this card is garbage, because it could pull your Tyrion, it could pull a Ragnaros, it could pull something huge and fuck you over. Well, it turns out that people are actually good at mulliganing. Who knew? Well, not always good, but relatively understand the idea that you shouldn't be keeping 8 drops and 7 drops in your opening hand. And so playing Dirty Rat on turn 1 or turn 2 actually didn't really have that big of a downside, and ended up usually blocking a lot more than it did. Like, a lot of times it would pull out a 3/2 or a 2/3 that Dirty Rat could easily trade into. But it has seen a ton of play in Reno Lock, and it is a staple in that deck, comboing this card with Bran and with Mind Control Tech to steal 2 creatures, comboing this card with the Doomsayer, you know, hoping to pull your opponent's Doomsayer. It became a really awesome card to gamble with. Ended up being a 10 out of 10, and I believe I rated it fairly low, so definitely a whiff on this one. Moving on. Blowgill Sniper. It's a Murloc. It deals 1 damage. It has a shitty body. We knew it sucked. Turns out it sucked. Stolen Goods. Too slow. 2 mana, too slow. It sucked. And it turns out the entire hand buffing mechanic kind of sucks. So, Sleep with the Fishes. This card is seeing a tiny bit of play in a Control Warrior deck that actually hit rank 1 Legend. And I'm kind of shocked by that, because I thought this card was pretty poopy. Yay, I can Whirlwind and then hit everything for 4, so it's a 2-card Flame Strike for 3 mana? I mean, that's good. It's worth doing, but it also clears your board, so it's not really a Flame Strike in that sense. It's more like an Anomalous. Well, a smaller Anomalous. So, I mean, it technically does see play, so, I mean, I guess in theory I should be rating it a 5, but honestly, I just don't think it's that good of a card. Neat card, cool art, but yeah, it still gets a 3 or a 4 in my book. Jade Shuriken. Again, same thing with Jade Rogue. Jade Rogue is not really a thing aside from the deck that I play. This card is very, very good in that deck, though. It scales with spell damage. It gets you Golem. It removes a creature, adds a creature. So tempo-wise, it's excellent. This is a really, really good card in a Jade deck. The problem is, though, nobody has made a viable Jade deck aside from myself. But if that deck does not get you a Legend, which it could, maybe if it was piloted by a better player, this is a huge part of that deck. So I rated this like an 8, and I do think it is an 8 in a Jade deck. But the problem is, since that Jade deck is not really viable or has not become widespread yet, can you really rate it that high? I don't think so. Hidden Cache. I knew this card was going to be bad. It costs 2 mana to give your random minion in your hand +2/+2. It does nothing to develop the board. It only buffs minions in your hand. You have to hold on to this card to buff those minions. Even if you get it for free off a Cloaked Huntress, who cares? You know, you're still only getting +2/+2, and that's the problem, is that these buffs just aren't buffing your cards enough, and they're delayed because you have to play the card and then the card attacks. So that was sort of the huge problem with hand buff, and that's why this card sucks, but we already knew it sucked, so no big deal. Devolve. Hated this card. Knew it was going to be the bane of my existence. Knew it was going to be good. And it has found a home in Control, Shaman, and people are using it to get rid of death rattles. They're using it to really, really reduce the impact of strong boards. You know, usually there's a lot of minion combat. You know, Shaman has 3 or 4 minions. You have 3 or 4 minions. And then Devolve comes down and all your minions are terrible. And they make fantastic trades, or they just Lightning Storm it now. And so what it's done is actually increase the effectiveness of Lightning Storm and Maelstrom Portal, because you can play this, then clear your opponent's board with a Maelstrom Portal where you would have used a Lightning Storm. Or you slap this down on a board that you could not kill with Lightning Storm, and all of a sudden you can kill it with Lightning Storm. It ends up being a really good card, but again, only in a Control Shaman deck. Originally I had rated this a 10. I thought it was going to fit in every single deck. Like I said, it's a Mass Hex for only 2 mana. But it turns out that it's only finding play in the Control Shaman decks. So, but still good. Still a good card, and not a 10, but I'd say at least a 7. Jade Claws. Knew this card was going to be fantastic. Knew that Jade Shaman was going to be a thing. And I remember thinking, well, you know, mid-range Shaman has, you know, these cards. And I'm like, you could take a few of them out and add a few Jade things, and it'd be just as good, if not better. And Jade Claws is a huge part of that. And what Jade Claws really does work well is it combos with Small Time Buccaneer and combos with Pirates to be able to play Small Time Buccaneer, get patches, they attack. Your opponent plays something, maybe he gets rid of patches, gets rid of the Buccaneer, Jade Claws comes out, you kill that minion. So this card has been really, really good. It's been very impactful, and you know, it's just another great early game Shaman card. And I cannot wait for the nerf to Spirit Claws, because hopefully that means Shamans will slow down a little bit or not be able to control the early game that much, but Jade Claws is another perpetrator, you know. Wicker Flame. Paladin sucks right now. Wicker Flame Burn Bristle is included in every Paladin deck. The only viable Paladin deck right now is actually Murloc Paladin, but not mid-range Murloc Paladin, the OTK Murloc Paladin, and this card does see play in that deck. So I rated it a 10 out of 10. And yes, it is an auto-include in every Paladin deck, but just Paladins aren't that good. So, is this card rated that highly? I mean, you could still give it like a 5, because it does see play, but I don't know. It's just the problem is Paladin, not this card. Unlicensed Apothecary. Man, was I wrong on this card. I thought this card's going to be fantastic. 3 mana 5/5 Demon. Yes, the drawback is bad, but this card has actually killed more people who've played it than killing their opponents. You play this, then your opponent plays Leroy, and then you're dead. You know, and getting this off a Faceless Summoner was just you might as well quit right then and there. So I thought it would be good in like a Zulak, but it isn't even good in like a Demon Zulak deck that I created. I actually ended up cutting it because it ended up killing me too fast, and I ended up taking too much damage. So huge statted for the mana cost, but man, this is a shitty top deck. It's a shitty card late game, and yeah, big whiff on this one. Huge whiff. I gave this like a 9, 8 or a 9, I think, and it ends up being a 0. I mean, it's just a bad card. Toxic Sewerus, nobody thought this was going to be good. Yes, it's more weapon removal, which is good. It's still a 3 mana 4/3 that you're putting in your deck. Why? It did see some play in Reno Lock initially, but not anymore. You might as well just play Acidic Swamp Ooze, because that card is better. It's cheaper. It's statted close, pretty close. It only loses +1/+1. It only loses, and then it's able to kill an entire weapon as opposed to just one durability. So way better. This card is garbage. Poopy, poopy, poop, poop. Street Trickster. We all knew this card is crap. Turns out to be crap. Shaky Zip Gunner. Man, this card should be good, right? 3 mana 3/3 that gives a random in your hand +2/+2. This card is surprisingly hard to die. And then by the time you get the buff on it, it's like turn 5, and then you have to play the minion, and then it's not until turn 6 that you end up actually getting to use the card. That's why this card sucks. It's just too slow, as is all Hunter mechanics. And again, random fucking minion. Just let me choose. Shaku. I called this one. I told people that Shaku was going to be good, that Shaku was going to find a place, and it does have a place in a new aggro rogue deck that has shot to popularity. So, I was wrong. I thought it was going to be a stealth rogue deck, a stealth tempo rogue deck that was going to play this card, but it turns out it's just an aggro rogue deck. And why does it work in that deck? Because you still get a 2/3 body, it gets stealth, it's guaranteed to get an attack for the most part, and you get a card. And sometimes you get more than one card. And so, it's just a nice card to have. This is one of those cards where I was surprised how easily it slotted into so many decks. Miracle Rogues were playing this card, so yeah, I'm not too surprised. I did rate it pretty highly. I was wrong, like I said, on where it would come in, but I wasn't wrong on the quality of the card. Shadow Rager, meme card. We all knew it was a meme card. We all knew it sucked. It sucks. Sergeant Sally, totally wrong on this one. I thought this card would be good. I thought it would fit into every hand buff paladin. I thought buffing this to like a 3/3 or a 4/4 would be awesome. It's a flame strike on a body. Like, how could that be bad? So slow, and then your opponent does get to choose how to trade into it. And your opponent being able to figure out how to trade into it actually ends up making this card really weak. One of the things about Sylvanas that was so strong is it was guaranteed to steal a minion unless your opponent had no minions on the board. And so a lot of times what would happen is you'd play Sylvanas, and then they would trade their whole board into it to prevent you from stealing anything. But it would also leave them with no board. With Sergeant Sally, it's sort of the same idea, but it takes so much longer to get this set up. And that's what ends up being the problem, is Sylvanas is even seen as too slow right now and is not seeing play. And so Sergeant Sally, unfortunately, is also too slow and not seeing play. Rat Pack. Hunters. I miss Hunter. I miss Hunter being good with this card. This is a good card, and it should see play in Hunter, but Hunter just sucks. And so, unfortunately, this card sucks too. It's a good card in a vacuum. It's just not a good card in practice. So I rated this a 10. In practice, it ends up being a 0, just because Hunter doesn't see play, and Hunter's not good. Manic Soulcaster. I underestimated this card. I'm surprised at how many decks it's actually... Well, Reno Mage. But it ends up being a really good card in that deck. Being able to couple this with Reno, being able to couple this with Kazakus, ends up being really good. And it turns out people even meme themselves and play Brand Manic Soulcaster and put 2 Kazakuses or 2 Renos in their deck. They forget it's there. And then they draw their original Reno, or they somehow get their Reno back, or they end up not being able to activate their own Reno. But yeah, it's still a 3-mana 3/4. It's still good. It sees play. It's an auto include in the Reno Mage, and so yeah, I was surprised at how well this card performed. Even though I did think it was going to be pretty good, I rated it like a 7 or an 8, and I'd say it's about a 7 or an 8 actually. But I would consider it more like an 8 or a 9. It's a really good card. Cabal Talent Priest. Everybody knew this card was going to be good. This card is fantastic. It gives you 3/7 worth of stats on 3 mana, as long as you have another minion. It's a double auto include in Dragon Priest, and Dragon Priest is a tier 2 deck, and this is a large reason why that deck is actually any good. This card is the linchpin to make Dragon Priest go. We all knew that. I rated it a 10 out of 10. It is definitely 10 out of 10. Big hit on that one. Cabal Courier. I had originally thought that all these cards were bad. These Discover a class card. Well, if any of them is good, it's Cabal Courier. It does see play in Reno Lock, and combining this with Brand gets you 2 cards, which is pretty nice. And honestly, the Cabal family of cards work together the best out of all the families. I think it goes Cabal, then Jade, then hand buff, unfortunately. And so being able to get 2 cards, especially Mage, Priest, and Warlock cards, ended up being excellent. And this is a very good card. And I rated it a 6. I would say it's more like a 7 or an 8. Hired Gun. Knew it was crap. Knew it wouldn't play well. Figured it was going to be an arena card, and it turns out it is a good arena card, but it's also a shitty constructed card and never saw play. Nailed it. Grime Street Smuggler. I always kind of thought this card was a little weak just on its stats like this, and being able to buff something +1/+1 is good, but doing it on 3 mana is kind of bad. However, I had originally thought that there was going to be more buff mechanics, and so your ability to get this motherfucker up to a 3/5 or a 4/6 and then still play it on curve on 3 mana, I thought was going to be pretty powerful. But I underestimated how much tempo you lose, that it's just, you can't get it back by just playing a 4/6 on 3 because your opponent already has, you know, Tunnel Trog, Totem Golem, and then Lightning Bolt this thing and trade in the Totem Golem, and then and they're still ahead. So that was really the problem with this card, is just it was understated given its effect. If they just made this a 3 mana 3/4 and give a random minion in your hand +1/+1, I think it actually would see a lot of play, and I think it would contribute to a hand buff deck. But like I said, the hand buff deck just turned out to be slow. Too slow. You know, I think they severely underestimated how good Pirates would be. Grime Street Pawnbroker. How does this card not see play in a Pirate deck? Well, it's not a Pirate itself. Plus, buffing a random weapon in your hand +1/+1 turns out is too slow. You actually want to play the weapon and then buff it. This is why Upgrade, and this is why the Bloodsail Cultist is so strong, and that's why this card does not see play in that sense. Plus, it's understated compared to the Bloodsail Cultist. So the redundancy of the cards ended up actually being a bad thing. Normally, having some redundancy in card games is good, because instead of getting, especially in Hearthstone, because instead of getting the effect twice, you get the effect 4 times. And you would think this card is kind of doing that, right? Allowing you to get that 3rd and 4th weapon buff. But again, the weapon has to be in your hand, and playing this doesn't allow you to play the weapon a lot of the time. And so that was really the problem with this card, is it was delaying your ability to play the weapon, and you didn't want that. You wanted to have something like a N'Zoth's First Mate, a Fiery War Axe, an Arcanite Reaper. This card kind of works with Arcanite Reaper, but then you're taking the stat loss of not playing a 4 health minion for 3 mana, i.e. a Frothing Berserker or a Bloodsail Cultist. So I rated this really highly, like an 8 or a 9, and it turns out it just doesn't see play. And so, you know, I still think it's a good card. I still think it's a 4, but it just doesn't see play. And I honestly, this is one of those cards where even if hand buffing came back, I don't think would actually see a lot of play. Fellark Soulfiend. Wow, everybody thought this card was going to be so good. Turns out it is total poop. Yes, it's overstated. Yes, it's a 3 mana 3/7, but like, you'd rather play Cabal. Like, Cabal Talon Priest destroys this card, because it doesn't get hurt at the start of your turn, and all you got to do is deal 5 damage to it, and then it kills itself. So it ended up being a really bad card. The amount of mana that you'd have to add to this card to actually make it good is poo. So I originally rated this a 7. I was actually not that high on the card, even though a lot of people were, and it ended up being a 0. Crystal Celestial Dreamer. We all knew this card was going to be crap. It's really hard to get a 5 attack minion on turn 3. You know, even a Duskboar is not strong enough, so you don't play this card on curve. Really, it's a win more card. If you have something with 5 attack and you play this, you get a 5/5. Hooray! So maybe this gets played on turn 5 after you play a 5/4, and that 5/4 lives, and you get a 5/5, and then Hero Power or play a 2-drop. See what I mean? Like, the applications of this card are just too narrow. We all thought it was going to be crap. Turned out being crap. It was a 0 before. It's a 0 now. Blubber Baron. I kind of hoped the hand buff mechanic was going to make this card good, because I figured if you played a Grime Street Outfitter, that turns this card into a 3/3, giving it +1/+1 by the buff, and then giving it +1/+1 because of its effect. So it'd be pretty easy to get a 3 mana 8/8 9/9, like, not too long down the road. The problem is, though, is that if you're still alive by that point and you have enough buffed minions to drop a 3 mana 8/8, why not just drop a 0 mana 8/8 like an Arcane Giant? You know, is this card end up being too slow, and it suffers from the Boulevard Forward Ring issue because it has to be in your hand. If this was anywhere, this card would be fantastic. Why didn't they just do that? I think they didn't want to do that because there were so many Battlecry minions out there, and this card would have been fucking OP if they did. So, cards end up sucking, even though I thought it had potential, and I rated it a 6 before, if I remember correctly, and it turns out it's a 0. Backstreet Leper, we all knew was crap, turned out to be crap. Auction Master Beardo, we knew it was going to be crap, turned out to be crap. Volcanic Potion, we knew it was going to be great, we knew it was going to be a sweeper, we knew it was going to make either Reno Mage or Tempo Mage a thing. Turns out Tempo Mage is starting to make a comeback, and it turns out that Reno Mage auto-includes this. 10 out of 10 before, 10 out of 10 now. Small-time recruits. Thought an aggro Paladin was going to work, thought an aggro Handbuff Paladin was going to work, and this card was going to be a part of it. It turns out paying 3 mana to draw 3 1-cost cards that you then have to play later is too expensive and too slow. You know, playing this on turn 3 was such a huge tempo loss, it didn't matter. Potion of Polymorph. It turns out that your opponent being able to play something into this made this card significantly weaker than we originally thought. However, what it ended up doing is it ended up having a tempo effect. And weirdly enough, this was finding play in Reno Mage, but in aggressive Reno Mage builds. And so you would play this to sort of stop your opponent's Doomsayer, to stop your opponent's 4 drops, 5 drops, etc. And so that's what's really cool about this card, is surprisingly good tempo play, because now your opponent has to play their 1-drop or 2-drop into this to try to prevent it from either getting copied, thinking it's Mirror Entity, or it getting polymorphed. That being said, the card actually doesn't see that much play in slow Reno Mages, but it does see play in the faster Reno Mages. So I originally rated this card pretty highly because I thought it would be the bane of my existence. But like I said, mages don't play that many secrets anymore. So even though this card is there, it's not really affecting the meta, and it's not really something you play around. So I would still give it a 5. I'd increase it to a 5 because it does see play. It's just not that impactful. Pilfer Power. I thought this card was going to be really good because I thought you could make a token ramp druid, and it turns out you want to do either the tokens or the ramping, but not both. And so this card ended up being terrible, and it's a dust. Jade Blossom. Being able to ramp and get a Jade Golem is great, and this card is great, and it's double include in Jade Druid. The problem is, though, is that it is slow because it costs 3 mana. And so what ended up happening is if you didn't play anything and then you played this, yes, you got to ramp to turn 5, but all you really had on board was a 1/1, and then by that time Shamans were killing you and dropping 4 mana 7/7s. So while this card is very, very good, it's an auto-include in Jade Druid, and Jade Druid is a nice tier 2 deck, it is really slow, and it's slower than people thought. So I originally rated this a 10. But it actually turns out to be about an 8. Blood Fury Potion. We knew it was crap, and it ended up being crap. It's 3 mana, get 3 attack. That's terrible. It saw a little bit of play in a Demon Zulak deck that I created, but I quickly cut it to just put other stuff in there. Organ Racer, Pack Filler. We all knew it was Pack Filler. It's crap. Daenerys Hog Chopper. How many times is your opponent hand going to be empty? I mean, this card was created to counter a situation that never happens, so it's terrible. Shadow Sensei. Is Stealth Rogue gonna ever be a thing? I think it could be, and I think this card will be a huge part of that eventually, but as of right now, Stealth Rogue is not a thing, and this card is bad. Sea Devil Stinger, we all knew this card was going to be bad. The effect is cool, but it's still a 4 mana 4/2, and Murloc was never a thing, and it was never stronger than other iterations of Warlock, and so this card is crap and will not see play, and we thought it wouldn't, and it still does not. Naga Corsair. This card turned out to be surprisingly good. I am shocked at how many pirate warrior decks this is fitting into. But, you know, when you think about it some more, it does make sense. It's a 4 mana 5/4 that buffs your weapon. Well, you know, if you're a rogue, you always have your dagger. If you're a warrior, you always have your axes. And, you know, having the extra attack on those is great and is necessary. And Naga Corsair does that. So, you know, it's a nice, well-statted body with a cool upside for pirate decks. It ends up seeing play in, you know, not a ton of play, but a significant amount of play in Pirate Warrior and in Pirate Rogue. So I remember I originally gave this card a 7, and it turns out it's like an 8. So it's an improvement. Lotus Illusionist. I really wasn't sure what to make of this card. I thought that they had like nerfed 6-drops because they made some shitty ones in this expansion. And so I figured this card would be worse than it was. But this is actually the problem with it. Attacks a hero. You play a 4-mana 3/5, you kind of want it to trade into small 2-drops and 3-drops as opposed to hitting face. And then if it does that, how's it going to hit face again and to turn itself into a 6-cost minion? So this card ended up being too slow and not really fitting what Shaman wanted. Especially, why would you play this when you could play a 4-mana 7/7? Originally rated this like in 7, and it turns out it's bad. It's a 0. Cookie Chemist. We all knew this was going to be bad. Why the fuck would you play a 4-mana 4/4 with this effect? How often do I need to swap the attack and health of a minion? It sees no play. It's terrible, and we all need it. Kazakus. Arguably the best legendary in the game right now. I would say that Aya Blackpaw is similar to it, but does not have the kind of ridiculous like game swinging effect that this card has. Combining with Bran is incredible. And I believe that this card and others like it that will be printed in the next expansion is going to keep the Highlander deck alive. So, Kazakus, awesome card, really cool. And like I said, arguably the #1 legendary. Cabal Chemist. Turns out that potions are bad, and there's really the only good ones are the ones that you would purposely put in your deck, not the ones that you draw from this card. 4 mana to get a 3/3 is bad. This card is crap. Originally, when I first reviewed it, I didn't know all the potions, and so the ones I did know were good. They were like Fellfire Potion, Dragonfire Potion, and then I ended up seeing the rest of the potions, and I was like, oh, these are kind of shitty, and so this card is bad and doesn't see play. So originally rated like an 8 on little information, and it turns out it's like a 0. Not a 0, it's like a 1 or a 2. It's a really good arena though. Jinyu Water Speaker. Jinyu Water Speaker has pretty much not single-handedly, but has been a huge component in Control Shaman. And this card right here, just 3/6 body, getting 6 health back. It keeps you alive another turn. It can heal up one of your big Jades. And the 3/6 body is really, really relevant. And often makes it like at least one good trade, if not 2. And like I said, it's very effective stat line to stay alive and do a lot of good stuff for your deck. Really good card. And I knew it was going to be a really good card, and it turns out it is. So I originally rated it like a 8, and I believe it's an 8. Yeah, I think an 8 counts. Jade Spirit makes Jade decks go. I had originally thought the 2/3 body was too small, but it turns out it doesn't really matter about the body. You're just trying to get the golem. And it gets you the golem, so yay. And I do think it's a little expensive for Jade Rogue, but it works perfect in Jade Shaman and perfect in Jade Druid. 10 out of 10 card, and it turns out it is a 10 out of 10. Hosen Healer. Good arena card. We all knew it was going to be a good arena card, and that's what it is. Restore a minion to full health. Good arena card does not see any constructed play. We knew it was going to be poop. It turns out to be poop. Grab Gadgetzan. You know, I really thought hand buff was going to work, and I really thought this card was going to be a part of it, and I rated this card really highly. And it is a 4-mana, essentially 6/5, but again, anytime I hear somebody say that, it makes me shake my head because I know they're not thinking about the game properly. Remember, what you're really getting is 4/3 right now, and then 2/2 on another minion later. And because it's delayed, it becomes slower, and so you lose the opportunity cost of being able to play something else. And so that's the problem with this card is on 4 mana, you could be playing a Kor'kron Elite and going face, and you're not. You're buffing something else. And so your attack, your ability to attack your opponent is compromised by having this card in your deck, as opposed to being added. And so that's why this card ends up being poop. I rated this 10 out of 10. It is like a 2. Totally whiffed on that one. Genzo the Shark. God, I whiffed on this one too. I really thought that an aggro deck would love to have Genzo in its deck, and it turns out it's really hard to get rid of all your cards enough to the point to where you can play Genzo and then have him live. A lot of times, Genzo is such a high priority target that he just ended up dying. And if they statted him at 4-5, he'd actually be quite good. Because 5 is a nice breakpoint for a lot of things. There are things out there that deal 3 damage and then you can ping. Or deal 4 damage and then this card dies. And the hard part is like you can't build the deck around it. Its effect is cool, but it's not, you know... Even the aggro decks don't run out of cards. Like, how is this card not in Pirate Warrior? I'm shocked by that, but it's just not. It's just not good enough. I mean, instead of a Naga Corsair, you could play this guy and then help you draw cards. And like I said, a lot of times your opponents will still have more than 3 cards. I don't know. I feel like people just gave up on this guy a little bit, but in all likelihood, he's probably just not good. I thought he was a 10 out of 10 for the aggro decks. But I thought he was going to be bad in every other deck, and it turns out even the aggro decks don't want him, so he's just a bad card. How is this card not good, Dispatch Kodo? The reason is because the hand buffs for Hunter are shit. Total shit. And so this card ends up just being a 4-mana 2/4 that deals 2 damage. So that's why this card is crap. But the card design itself, I think, is quite good, and if Hunter ever gets better hand buffs or different hand buffs in the future, this card could be good, but it's crap right now. Daring Reporter. This has seen a significant amount of play in Arena, for one, but 2, has also seen a lot of, not a lot of play, but play in a Druid deck that runs Naturalizes and Cold Light Oracles and then buffs this dude, and then this, you know, this Daring Reporter becomes like an 8/8 and then it just goes face. So, neat deck. It's a meme deck, though, and so it doesn't see constructive play. But we all kind of knew it wouldn't, and I think it was just one of those cards where they're exploring a mechanic. Crystal Weaver has seen play in Demon Zulak, but I'm the only one playing Demon Zulak. Well-statted minion with upside. It should fit into every single deck. It just doesn't. And Demon Reno Lock is not even a thing, which I thought it was going to be, and this would be included in that. So, card turns out to be not seeing play, but I don't think that means it's bad. Rating on this card, I originally rated it really highly, like a 9, and it turns out it's just a 5. Backroom Bouncer, knew it sucked, does suck. Jade Lightning, you would be great. 4 mana, deal 4 damage, summon Jade Golem, that's awesome. Remove your opponent's creature, gain tempo yourself. How could this be bad? It's not. It's great. We knew it was going to be great. 10 out of 10. Nailed this one. But this one, I don't want to give myself a ton of credit for nailing this one because it's not exactly a bold prediction. Greater Healing Potion. Turns out paying 4 mana to heal 12 health, but basically do nothing else with your turn is bad. So this card does not see play. However, when Reno rotates out, this card will see a ton of play in Priest. This will be a double include once Reno is gone. Call in the finishers. So there actually is a Murloc Shaman deck kind of roaming around in some of the circles. This card is a huge part of it. Combining this with Any Fin is Awesome is really good, and this card ends up seeing play in that, but for the most part, this card is bad. I originally did not rate it highly, though, because I thought that the Any Fin Paladin deck would not go. So this card gets actually a 5 now, and I originally rated it like a 2 or a 3. So in a way, it improved, so that's nice, but that Murloc Shaman deck is more for the memes than it is for the actual being good. Blast Crystal Potion. I thought this would be an auto-include in every Reno Lock deck. Being able to destroy a minion for 4 mana and just move on with your life, especially at 10 mana when it would have basically cost you nothing, would be really good. And it turns out that's what it is used for. Totally nailed this one, and it is seen in pretty much every Reno Lock deck, although some people are cutting it to add in other things. Brass Knuckles. 4 mana, 2/3. Knew it would be too slow. Knew it would not have enough impact. Only gives +1/+1 to your minions. The hand buff mechanic on this thing is bad, and this card is bad. Bad. But, had high hopes. But those high hopes were contingent upon the meta being slower than it is, and so this card sees no play. White Eyes. Why is this card not seeing play? I'm confused by this, to be honest with you. It's a 5-mana 5/5 with Taunt that shuffles the Storm Guardian into your deck. Like, how is this not seeing play in mid-range Shaman? How is this, you know, I don't know. It's getting outclassed by the Jade stuff, I guess. I think you'd rather just play a 4-mana 7/7 than a 5-mana 5/5 with Taunt, and I think Thing from Below is also making this hard. But, excuse me, this card is going to be, excuse me, I think we'll see more play in control-style Shamans than in mid-range Shamans. Still a good card, but I did rate it a 10 out of 10 when I first saw it, and I think it's really like a 6 or 7. Vermin Sensei. Knew it would suck. Knew Beast Druid was dead. They pushed it enough, and if the Menagerie Warden can't make Beast Druid go, this card does not make Beast Druid go. Honestly, I think they threw it in there just to try to add a little extra, and it's poop. And we knew it was poop. Straight Ride Investigator, we knew this card would be poop. It has seen tech play in a few tournaments, but nobody is teching it in their actual ladder decks. Spike Tog Raider, we knew it'd be poop. It is poop. I feel like I'm saying that a lot. Second Rate Bruiser. Figured this would be good if there was a very aggressive meta, but I wasn't convinced that the meta was going to get aggressive because I didn't think there was that many aggressive cards. In fact, most of the cards that were coming out seemed to enhance mid-range and control decks, and so Second Rate Bruiser I felt like was going to be too expensive. But it turns out with the advent of patches and patches being so strong that Second Rate Bruiser is really good and sees play in every single Reno lock deck and ended up being a 10 out of 10 when I really thought it was going to be like a 5 or less. So totally whiffed on Second Rate Bruiser. Really surprised at how good this card is. Red Mana Worm. Definitely thought there could be an OTK potential for this card once I realized how it actually worked. It is a neutral Mana Worm for everybody, but it costs 5 times as much. So that is the problem. This card is too expensive. If this card was 4 mana, it'd be ridiculous, and that's what it should have been. 4 mana 2/6s are relatively common. 5 mana 2/6s are not, even with a good effect. This effect is not worth 1 mana. But it did see play. I rated it kind of low. I rated it, I believe, a 4, and it did see a little bit of play, so technically it's a 5. Rise of the Chained. So this card in and of itself was really great, and I knew that the effect was insane, but I honestly thought that Reno Priest probably wasn't going to be very good. And while it has seen a significant amount of play, it does not see play anymore. It is too slow and inconsistent, but Rise of the Chained is the thing that made it a thing for even as long as it was. So the card is still a 10 out of 10 in that sense, but it in and of itself is not quite enough to make Reno Priest prominent. Lotus Assassin. The problem with this card, as needed as it is, as cool of an effect as it is, it's fostering a deck archetype for Rogue that doesn't really make sense. A mid-range control-style, board-centric Rogue doesn't really work. Rogues are really about tempo and about tempo swings, or about playing the Miracle style, and so if you're playing for the short game, or you're playing for the long game, you're not playing for the mid-game, and this card plays for the mid-game. So there you go. That's why it's bad. That's why it doesn't see play. It's not a bad card, it just doesn't see play. I originally rated this not that high because I kind of knew it wouldn't fit. It doesn't fit into any existing deck, and I had trouble seeing it fitting into future decks. I rated it a 6 because I thought it would see some play. It turns out it's a 4 because it does not see play. Lotus Agents, knew they were bad, turned out to be really bad. The stat line is terrible, the cost is too expensive, and yes, Druid, Rogue, and Shaman cards do work pretty well together, but nowhere near as good as the Cabal cards do. So I said this card is like a 3. It's about a 3. Knuckles. Hunter cards suck. Hunter sucks. And this card was especially a big letdown. Because the idea was to buff it up and have it become a 5/9 and then play it a 5 mana 5/9 on turn 5 and start whacking your opponent in the fucking face with this guy. But Hunter sucks and it's so slow and they're bad. Cabal Songstealer. Really thought this was only going to see play in Silence Priest, but it turns out it's seeing play in Dragon Priest. Just being able to silence a minion off, silence a Doomsayer, silence a taunt, and continue an attack, and getting that nice 5/5 body, really good. Really strong. Good card. I rated it a 7 to begin with, and it's about a 7 now. So it is seeing a pretty significant amount of play in a good deck. Grook for Master, and you would be crap. Turns out to be crap. Too slow, too slow, too slow. Wind Fury is giving a creature Wind Fury, and that's it, is terrible. Grime Street Enforcer. It is a good card in the Paladin hand buff deck, but the Paladin hand buff deck is too slow. And this card, to be honest with you, is the biggest perpetrator of that. Just, a 5-mana 4/4 that dies to fucking everything your opponent could play on turn 6, and all it does is buff your hand. This card should be 4 mana. If this was a 4 mana card, it'd be good. It would see play, and hand buff Paladin would actually be a thing. But no, they had to make it 5 mana. Why, Blizzard? Why? Why? Did you not test these cards? Did you not, how could you not see this aggro meta coming? Well, I didn't see it either, because all the cards they're printing seemed like they would slow the meta down, but they fucking forgot about Patches and Small Time Buccaneer, and they severely underestimated how strong those cards were going to be. Finja. I did not think this card was going to be that good, but it turns out this card is seeing play in Rogue, in Paladin, in Warrior, in Druid. This card is insane, and people are slotting it and a couple of Murlocs into every single class that I've... And Priest! I mean, like, what the fuck? I'm shocked at how good this card is. Shocked at how big of a swing on turn 6 this card becomes. Just being able to pull out Murlocs and do stuff with it, I mean, is insane. And I think what's really cool about this card is a lot of times it saves itself. So if you trade this into a 4-attack minion and it pulls out a Murloc War Leader, it still lives because it gets the War Leader buff. Really cool card. Ended up being a 10 out of 10, and I thought it almost... I didn't even think it was good. I thought it was like a 4. So totally whiffed. Totally whiffed on this one. Alright, let's move on. Draconid Operative, or DOP, as it's affectionately known. Knew it was going to be amazing. How could this card not be amazing? It's an auto-include in Dragon Priest. It's fucking fantastic. 10 out of 10, and it's definitely a 10 out of 10. Easy call. Like, you don't get to pat yourself on the back for calling this one. Doppelgangster. I thought this was the card that was going to make hand buff go, and it turns out it is good in that deck, but that deck is too slow. It's so hard to just draw this card and then buff it. You have to keep it in your opener, for God's sakes. Then you have to just hold it and buff it and buff it. And so in a weird way, it suffers the same problem as Blubber Baron does. Oddly enough, this card was more effective in Evolve Shaman than it was in hand buff Paladin, which is where I thought it would originally go. So we're all wrong on this card. I thought it was going to be a 10 out of 10. I thought this was the driver of the hand buff Paladin. I ended up cutting this card in a lot of my hand buff Paladin decks, my iterations of it. You know, the ones that were actually good. Ended up not even using this card. So, big whiff. Yeah, that's, wow. I'm really surprised because it seems like such a good card. Cryomancer. And you would be crap. Turns out to be crap. Turns out it's really hard to freeze stuff. Not even good in Arena. Burgly Bully. Burgly Bully has seen a significant amount of play, but not in Miracle Rogue. It's seeing play in Reno Mage. Turns out getting those coins for Archmage Antonitis, pretty darn important. Free fireballs. And that's what this card gives you. So if you want to think about it, it's more like a 5-mana 4/6, eventually give you free fireballs. Or eventually allow you to ramp a little harder into bigger 8-drops, 9-drops, etc. So, pretty cool card. Does see play. Originally didn't think it was going to be that good. Rated it like a 6 or 7, and it turns out it's more like an 8 in Reno Mage. But it doesn't see a lot of play in Rogue like I had originally thought it would be. And I thought Rogue was the one that was going to use this card, and then Miracle Rogue would include it. But it turns out this card is too slow even for Miracle Rogue. Bomb Squad. Knew this card would not be good because taking 5 damage and getting a 2/2 for 5 mana is just too expensive. Why is this not 4 mana? Seriously. Like, why is this not 4 mana? Really, dealing 5 damage to an enemy minion that you can target, that's great. You know, it's too expensive. It's just too expensive. I thought it was going to be bad. It turns out to be bad. It does see some play in Evolve Shaman, though. Play this on turn 6. You kill your opponent's thing. You evolve. This turns into a 6-drop. That's the deck I want to make. Alley Armorsmith. Kind of thought this card was not going to be good because of the 2 power. And my thinking was it would get stolen by Potion of Madness. It would get Cabal Shadow Priest stolen, because we all thought that the Shadow Madness Cabal Shadow Priest was the deck that was going to come out, and it really didn't, and Dragon Priest was the thing. So it turns out it actually does see a lot of play in Control Warrior, but not in the hand buff Control Warrior. The original idea was buff this thing to a 4/9, and then have it gain your ass armor all goddamn day, but the problem is it's too slow in order to do that. However, just playing a 2/7 with Taunt that gets you armor, turns out, is pretty darn good, and Control Warrior is seeing play, and this is a part of that. So, even though I was very hyped for this card, it actually did not lose as much as I thought, thought it was going to lose once I started really playing with the cards. I thought it was a 10 out of 10, or excuse me, I thought it was an 8 out of 10 because of its ability to get stolen. But I thought it was going to be very, very good in those hand buff decks because I figured you could buff it out of range. It turns out it's just a good card overall, just a solid card in Control Warrior, and it's probably about a 7. Lunar Visions. I thought this card was going to be really good, but I didn't think about how paying 5 mana and then getting minions later on that were cheaper wasn't actually that good and didn't actually get you ahead. It turns out most people are just using it just to draw the damn cards. And they're playing it in an Aviana Kun Cthulhu deck. So it does see some play, but it's just not a good card. And I underestimated how bad this card actually was. I thought this card was like a 7 or an 8, and it turns out it's more like a 3 or a 4. Piranha Launcher. Knew it was going to be bad. We all knew it was going to be bad. We all were like, Control Hunter's not a thing, Blizzard. Control Hunter is not a thing, Blizzard. It's not going to happen. Just stop. Stop it. Stop it with Control Hunter. Stop it. Just print good tempo cards for Hunter so it can fucking be an awesome tempo deck. Because that's what Hunter does. Stop trying to make Control Hunter a thing. Bad Blizzard. Whack it with a newspaper. So this card sucks. Everybody knows it sucks. Moving on. Wrathion. I thought this card was actually going to be good. I thought this card would be included in Dragon Priest, and it just doesn't see play. It does not see play even in Dragon Priest. And you know why? Because the stat line is too poor. You're paying 6 mana for a 4/5. That draws you a card like I can draw me a card. And it turns out that the value meta that I thought was going to be coming out of this just isn't, because there's too much aggro. And this card does not actually combat aggro because of its expensiveness. I do like the card. I do think it actually works really well in a hand buff deck. I was using it in a hand buff Dragon Paladin, and it actually performed really well, because this ended up becoming 6, 7, 8, 8 and drawing me 2 cards a lot of the time. You know, this and Fight Promoter was a really, really nice card draw engine for the hand buff decks. So, weird that it saw play in that, but not in Dragon Priest, where we originally thought it would. Wind Up Murderbot. We all thought this would suck. It turns out it does suck. It has to attack a minion and live to draw the card? That sucks. It should just be whenever this attacks, draw a card. Then people would play it. Madame Goya. I was confused about this card. I was trying to figure out a way to make it work. And it just turns out it can't. You know, people experimented with Druid decks to make this card work. I just dusted this motherfucker right away. I didn't even want to deal with it. And it turns out it does suck. Lucky Dude Buccaneer. I was pretty sure this card was going to be not that good, but I did think maybe it could make mid-range Pirate Rogue a thing. Getting a 6 mana 9/9 is pretty good, but it turns out it's actually surprisingly hard to get 3 attack on your weapon. Who knew? I figured just Deadly Poison, there you go. A couple of Naga Court Stairs, there you go. It's like, no, it's actually pretty hard. Because you want to use the weapon, and that's really the problem, is your desire to use the weapon doesn't allow you to save it for the Buccaneer itself. And the thing is, if you want to play a 6-mana 9/9, play Draconite Crusher. It's probably better. Actually, it's significantly better. So they just printed a worse card. Leather-clad Hog Leader. I remember thinking if there was any of the hogs that we're going to see play, this was the one, because it punishes control decks, and aggro decks might want to tech it in. Well, it turns out that's what's happening. There are decks that are teching in Leather-clad Hog Leader, but there are control decks that are playing other control decks, and so that's where I was wrong, is because the deck that is teching this card are control decks, not aggro decks. That being said, it does see some play, and I did rate it like a 5, and it turns out it's about a 6. Oh, Lucky Do Buccaneer, by the way. Poop. Poopy, poopy, poop, 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 poop. But we all knew it was going to be poop. So, not surprised there. Cabal Trafficker. Totally whiffed on this one. I really thought this card was going to be great. I thought a 6-mana 6/6 that draws you cards is going to be awesome. Turns out this is too slow, even in a Reno Lock deck. Like, Reno Lock is not playing this card. Ugh. Well, the problem is because it's being forced out by Abyssal Enforcer as well, which just has a better, more immediate effect. And a lot of times, honestly, the random demons that you get are crappy. Cabal Crystal Runner. Oh, this is gonna be the new thing from below. Blizzard, didn't you learn? Where? Cabal Crystal Runner's gonna be so good. I'm gonna get free 5-mana, free 5/5s. Where? Guess what? Secret Mage sucks, and so this card sucks, and nobody's gonna fucking play it because secrets suck. Yeah. So, Thing from Below gets reduced by totems. So the hero power reduces. So you're paying 2 mana to lose 1 mana. In this case, you're paying 3 mana to lose 2 mana. But you have to have the cards. You also have to play the cards. Whereas Thing from Below, you don't need to play cards because you're using your hero power. And it gets buffed by Totem Golem and Mana Tide Totem and Flame Tongue Totem. Right? So there's proactive cards that you're playing that are also reducing the cost of your Thing from Below. Cabal Crystal Runner is not proactive. Right? Because you're playing secrets. That's the problem with this card. That's why this card sucks. If it was anytime you play more than one spell in a turn, reduce the cost of this card by 1, or reduce the cost of this card by 2, it'd be really good. Then you would see play all the time. And Blizzard, you need to get on that. But yeah, crappy card, and it turns out Secret Mage is crap. And everything, all my scores for the secret cards were contingent upon secrets being good or bad. And it turns out secrets are bad, so this card is poop. Jade Behemoth. Knew it was going to be good. Knew it was going to be part of the Jade mechanic. Was pretty sure that Jade was going to be good. And it turned out they did print enough cards for it. And it turns out Jade Behemoth is good. Getting a 3/6 taunt and summoning a Jade Golem protected by that taunt is quite good. It is a little expensive. But aside from that, it's a good card. We all knew it was going to be a good card. Turned out to be a good card. Fight Promoter. Was shocked to hear that if you hand buff this by +2/+2, it will draw its own cards. And how could that be bad? That's got to be great, right? You combine that with the... I forget what the other card was, the drew cards. Oh, Wrathion. Right, this card with Wrathion in a Dragon Paladin deck ended up being, could be really good. And even if it was just a 4/4, its ability to draw 2 cards, like, this effect is not that hard to pull off. It just doesn't see play because it's too slow. It just doesn't affect the board enough on turn 6, which is a huge turn. Thorson, right, is reducing mana for everything. There's just too much going on by the time Aya Blackpaw is making your Jades better. All this does is draw you cards, so it's setting you up for the next turn instead of affecting the board on that turn. And turn 6 is when things really start ramping up and really start moving, and so in a weird way, you're actually wasting your turn, even if you are playing a 6-mana 6/6. Defias Cleaner. We all knew this card was going to be poop. It is poop. Boop, boop, boop. They printed this card to stop Sylvanas, and turns out Sylvanas is too slow. It doesn't see play anyway. Big time Racketeer. There was thoughts of sticking this into a hand buff Paladin deck and getting like a 4/4 or a 5/5 and a 6/6 for 6 mana. It turns out that just doesn't do enough. And this card was actually just created to nerf Moonglade Portal and nerf the other random 6-drop cards that had come out. But it's good in Arena, and it's pretty good with Bran, but it's only good if Bran is already out there. So you kind of have to set up Bran on turn 5 and then play this card. But I think we all pretty knew it wasn't going to see a lot of play. It does not see play. It's not poop. It's like a 4. It's like just below playability, but I think we all... Nobody was hyped about this card. Eye of Blackpaw, arguably the best legendary in the mainstream. Gadgetzan. It was my #1 legendary. I think Kazakus is actually better now, but this is #2 in my opinion. I still think Patches is #3, even though it has had the biggest impact on the meta. Like those 3 cards, if you want to think about the 3 tri-classes, like Eye of Blackpaw for the Jade, Kazakus for the Cabal, and honestly you could say Patches was the Goons legendary in that sense, because it's seen in Pirate Warrior. So, I mean, of the 3, it could be argued that this card is the best, but it's really a value card, and it is slow, and it impacts the board by adding stats, but it doesn't have taunt, it doesn't defend you, and so there were definitely times where I would draw Eye of Blackpaw, and I just already would be dead. So its only issue is the fact that it's slow, and you don't get to attack with it until turn 7. But it does require pretty immediate responses from people. Ancient of Blossoms, poorly statted, terrible card, doesn't see play. We all knew it when it doesn't. It's crap. Felfire Potion. A little surprised this card is not seeing the kind of play that I thought it would. And it turns out that dealing 5 damage to yourself is not really worth the 5 damage to all characters, because you end up just clearing your own board. I really thought this would see inclusion in Reno Lock more than it does, but turns out Abyssal Enforcer is just better. Dragonfire Potion. Not being able to kill dragons. Because Azure Drake is a thing, this card is not that good. And I think it's 6 mana. It's too slow. A lot of times priests would be dead by 6 mana, so by the time they played this card, it didn't change anything. They just they'd die to the Pirate Warrior Fire, die to the Pirate Warrior's Arcanite Reaper. So this card was supposed to be the savior. This card was supposed to be 10 out of 10. Same thing with Felfire Potion, and honestly, neither one is seeing that much play. They both end up being 5s. Like, they're still seeing some play, but nowhere, and not anywhere near the amount of significance I thought they were going to. Jade Chieftain, good card. It's a 5/5 that summons a Jade Golem. So my thinking is that if you had not played any Jades up until this point, you get a 5/5 and a 1/1 with Taunt. But usually by the time you play Jade Chieftain, you've already got at least a 3/3 coming out of this thing. And getting a 5/5 and a 3/3 with Taunt is pretty darn good. And like I said, it just keeps the Jade Golem train rolling. Good card. Ended up being good. I thought it was going to be too expensive, but it turns out that just getting the stats and the taunt is pretty good. I rated it like a 6. It ends up being like an 8 or a 9. Inkmaster Solia. This card I thought was a 10 out of 10. I thought it was going to be fantastic. I thought it'd be an auto-include in every Reno Mage deck. It turns out it just took a while for Reno Mage to become a thing. And a surprising amount of people were cutting Inkmaster Solia, but now it's made a comeback because they realize how good it is to actually be able to play. Like originally we were thinking, oh, we'll play Inkmaster Solia and we'll combine it with the 10 mana Kazakus Potion. But a lot of times Inkmaster Solia died when you combine it with a 10 mana Kazakus Potion. So what people are doing now is they're going Inkmaster Solia. They're playing Raging Torch, or Forgotten Torch, drawing the second one, then going Inkmaster Solia, Pyroblast, Raging Torch to deal 16 damage in one turn. And so that's where Inkmaster Solia comes in. It's a modified OTK in that sense. So it definitely is seeing play now. I rated it a 10 out of 10. It's more like an 8 or a 9 out of 10, but it's seeing a lot more play now. It's a lot more significant. Damn you, Paladin cards! Damn you, sucking Grime Street Protector! Is this card good in a vacuum? Yes. Is it too slow for this meta? Yeah! That's why it sucks. Goddamn. Really wished hand buff Paladin would be the thing. I'm Paladin guy. I love Paladin. Not being able to get past rank fucking 7 with Paladin, like, annoys the shit out of me. Excuse me. So, like I said, in a vacuum, this card is good. I rated it a 10 out of 10. It just ends up being too slow for this meta. It doesn't see play. So, it's not good. Don Honcho, again, too slow. Just way too slow. The hand buff mechanic is too slow. It's just not good. Damn you, Don Honcho. I did have worries because I thought Don Honcho was understated, and so I didn't rate it as highly as some others thought. So I rated like an 8, and it, like I said, just hand buff sucks, and it turns out this card is bad. Bissell Enforcer, 10 out of 10. We knew it'd be a 10 out of 10. It's a Hellfire attached to a body for 7 mana. Fantastic. It clears boards. It's a staple in Reno Lock. It's seen in every single Reno Lock deck. And we knew it would. We knew it'd be good. Easy, easy peasy peasy. Greater Arcane Missiles. We knew this card would be crap. It turns out to be crap. It's too expensive. It's too random. Mayor Noggenfogger. We knew his card was insane. We knew it was a meme card. Turns out it's a meme card. Cruelly Unshackled. You know, there was a promotion when this first came out, where if Blizzard got enough votes for something, they would reveal the legendary of this particular week. And so Cruelly Unshackled was on the 1 week where we didn't get enough votes. And so then this card was not revealed to the public until later. And then when they finally saw it, they were like, this card is stupid! Who would use this card? So for a long time, this card was crap. But weirdly enough, very recently, there are Reno decks that are playing this card. I'm a little surprised by that. So, yeah, even though I ended up saying this card was bad, it's seeing more play than I thought. I rated it like a 2, and it's like a 4. Like, it's still seeing some play. So, surprised by that, but there you go. And last but not least, we got Kuhn, the Forgotten King. Everybody thought this was going to be the best legendary. Everybody thought this card would be amazing. It's a 0 mana 7/7, and it turns out that you have to play it on turn 10, so it's not that good. However, it did spawn a Aviana Kuhn Cthulhu deck, which I think is super fun to play and is really neat. Not really competitively viable, but cool. So, the card is just slow. It's just too slow. It doesn't even see play in Jade Druid, which blows my mind, because you'd think it'd be easy to include it there. But yeah, that's it. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for watching the video. I did try to keep it as short as I possibly could, but we did have 130 cards to get through. Thank you for watching, and I hope that this helped in terms of your card evaluation and how you see the future, and can't wait for Lost Secrets of Ungoro coming out hopefully soon. Probably April is my guess. Probably April 1st if they make the announcement tomorrow. So thank you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it. Keep learning. Keep rocking. And the Rockstar is out of here. Thank you guys for watching these videos. If you like them, you can subscribe here. And you can watch the most recent videos here. And some of the best videos right here. Thank you again, guys. Keep learning, keep rocking, and the Rockstar will see you later.